What is up, family? Thank you so much for joining me, Jeff Marconette Jr., the award-winning international Make Every Second Count speaker, for another brand new episode of Make Every Second Count Live. Now, I'm a little under the weather, so I'm sorry about that. But if you would, please make sure you give us all kinds of thumbs up, hearts. You can give us hugs. Don't get too close though. I don't want to get you sick. And then you can give us frowny faces, cry faces. You can even get mad at us. I don't care. Just help us trick the algorithm on any of the socials we're on. Also, please keep the comments rolling in. We want to have more of a conversation than make just a presentation. And I am very happy about this guest. She is quite the world changer. So, with no further ado, I would like to bring to the stage Miss Lucy Lou herself.
Hey, Jeff.
Hey, Lucy, how are you doing?
I am doing amazing.
That is great. I am so happy to hear that. Hey, I'm going to be inviting a few people on my phone. And if you would tell everybody a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, and what you do, I would find that to be sublime.
Absolutely. So my name is Lucie McGuire. I am from a small town in Florida called Jensen Beach on the East Coast of Florida. And I am a multipreneur, but what we're talking about today, I am the founder of Moxie Adventure Partners, which is providing people the opportunity to be able to travel on a budget, but also to see the world in ways that maybe they never thought that they could. So that is what I am passionate about, inspiring people how to travel and showing them that there's so much more to see out there than what they think. So that's what I'm excited about to talk about today.
That is freaking awesome. Thank you so much, Lucy. Now, I know from personal experiences that life has a tendency to try to give you some roadblocks, tries to hold you down from climbing that ladder of success. Now, in my life, that was a car accident. I spent 2.5 months in a coma, 3.5 in the hospital. They told me that I probably wouldn't be walking again, but guess what? I'm up and walking. Nobody can stop me. I'm all the way up. But so, has there been anything in your life that you've had to face that tried to stop you?
Yeah, there's been quite a few forks in the road, I like to call them. And it's quite funny because we don't ever expect those forks in the road to come along. But one of the biggest ones that happened to me was my dad getting diagnosed with a form of Parkinson's disease when I was 22 years old. Yeah. And I ended up taking care of him. So me and my boyfriend at the time, ex-boyfriend now.
Well, props on that, taking care of him. I know how hard that would be. I watched my parents, my dad do that, took care of his mom before she passed.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the most heart-wrenching things you can deal with, especially when they are losing parts of themselves. And he had a form of Parkinson's and then also dementia. So when they are quick-witted typically and they lose pieces of themselves, it was definitely the hardest part, is seeing that deteriorate over the time. And I know that a lot of people have dealt with that. Losing a parent is something that is extremely hard. But I took care of him up until shortly before he passed, when he got to put into a nursing home because of the level of his care. But it ended up, leading me to what I do today. And it really made me believe to make every second count, because he taught me that life is too short and what are we living on this? We never know when our last day is. And he really, really did teach me that.
Yeah, that is so true. And I find that to be funny that other people have learned the same lessons that I've learned through different experiences,
Yeah.
and that to be valuable. So, how did it make you feel to quit your job and go take care of your dad? I know he, like you said, he wasn't himself.
Yeah. And so I actually didn't quit my job,
Oh,
but I was working full time, going to school full time, and taking
wow.
care of my dad all at the same
Massive
time
props.
at 22 years old. And it was a lot. It was weighing, but it was also the most time I ever got to spend with my dad other than when I was a kid. So I was very grateful for that time as well. But it was definitely difficult to see it get to that point, and him lose pieces of himself. But I'm grateful for the time that I had. I really am. And I think everything in life happens for a reason, a season, or something that leads us to where we need to be. And yeah, I'm thankful for the time I did have, because again, we never know how long we have. And it could have always been less. I always tell myself that. Like, people tell me, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, I mean, I am too. I wish every day that he was here, but it's also one of those things that I could have had less time, and I just try to be grateful for the time I did have.
That is so awesome. I'm happy that you got to have the time with your father before it was too late.
Yeah, me too. And he was older, and that's why a lot of people, I just turned 30 years old. And a lot of people in my local community are surprised by that. Usually I don't even share that. But my dad would have been 80 this year. So he had me when he was 50. So I was always a very old soul. And yeah, I take a lot after my dad. So
Well, that's cool. Well, so was your dad the adventurous and the traveler as well, or not?
So no, actually, neither of my family was like travelers. He used to talk about like wanting to go and travel. He was just one of those people, like you could see him in the grocery store, and he would talk to everybody around him at the grocery store, tell him his whole life. And he was just such a bubbly, like people loved being around him, and he lit up a room. And my mom is from Dominican Republic. My dad's from Pennsylvania. And so I got to see Dominican Republic when I was younger a couple of times, but only a couple times. And I never really got to travel like with my family. We never took like family vacations anywhere. So the story that led me to travel, which I think we're going to get into a little bit later, or we can get into now, I don't know what, but I could have never guessed that that's how I would have ended up traveling. But yeah.
So what started all your traveling? I mean, there had to be a catalyst for your traveling.
Yeah, so actually it was my dad passing away. And he had passed away. He had a little bit of insurance money, and I ended up getting a little bit of that money after splitting it with my family, my siblings. And I tried to buy a house. That didn't work out. I felt like everything was kind of going wrong in my life at that point. My boyfriend, we weren't in the best spot at that time. And I ended up, after the house fell through and I didn't get the house when I was trying to buy that, I ended up in a situation with an opportunity to be able to study abroad. And I took that opportunity, and I kind of had like what I call a screw it moment, where I was like, you know what, if nothing in my life is going to go right, I lost my dad, I'm in this relationship, I need to, the house I'm trying to buy isn't working out. I was kind of like, well, screw it, I'm going to go to Europe then. And it was the best decision I could have ever made. Helped me find myself, and I didn't even know I was lost, and I ended up spending 4 months overseas. I did a month studying abroad, and then 3 months backpacking.
Wow.
Yeah. And that changed my life forever.
How exactly did that change your life?
So I learned about myself, and I know this sounds cliche, but I learned about myself in ways that I didn't even realize. I'd say I found myself, and I didn't even know I was lost. And even though it's funny, I look back now and I'm like, oh, I was clearly lost. I clearly had a lot going on and I didn't really know what direction I was. I was 22 years old. You don't know yourself when you're 22 as much as we want to say we do, and we want to cling on to that adulthood. And I really got a chance to explore my independence. Being away from home for the first time in 4 months taught me a lot about, exploring and seeing new cultures, understanding other cultures, meeting new people, language barriers, but not even as many language barriers as I expected, learning about the history of places. I really, coming from a small town in Florida, I had never seen anything like that. And I saw 10 new countries when I was over there that summer. Yeah. And I did all on a budget.
That's a lot. So I know people are going to wonder about how you did it on a budget, but there's a couple things that I want to get to first. Now, I need to say hi to Ben Bruce, who's watching us. He's from Lagos, Nigeria, but he is in the Dominican Republic right now. And then we have my dad watching from across the street, real far. And then we have Tiffany Harris, who is watching. I don't know where she's based. Maybe you do.
Tiffany, she is in Tennessee. I think it's Tennessee. Pretty sure it's Tennessee. My brain is like not. Pretty sure it's Tennessee. Tiffany, you could let us know if we're right.
Yeah, that's awesome. So thank you guys so much for watching with us, and thank you for saying hi, Tiffany. Appreciate that. She also said hi to you, by the way. But
hey, Tiffany.
Then Ben Bruce said, you're welcome, Lucy. It's a great pleasure having you aboard today. I about said abroad today.
Oh, it says abroad, but aboard? I think maybe that's what he meant. Or you know what? He's abroad. So, and we're talking about, he's in Dominican Republic, so he's overseas. And we're talking about travel, so I'll take the abroad.
Yeah. I think it might have been a typo. But so, like I said, I know that we're going to talk about the traveling on a budget, but I want to figure out if there is anything from going through everything with your dad that you learned that was reinforced when you were on the trip.
I would say that really coming back to kind of the theme of all of your, like, why you created this podcast, right? That making every second count. It really did just reinforce that, we as Americans, especially, I feel we work a lot. And my dad was one of those people. He worked until pretty much until he could retire or his body wouldn't let him work anymore. And I had also been a workaholic, and I had worked up until I went on that trip. I actually quit my job of 7 years before I went on that trip because I was finishing my bachelor's degree. And I was like, oh, by the time I come from Europe, like it'll be easy to get a job. And it was the first time in my entire life since I was 14 years old that I had that amount of time off, or even 2-3 weeks off. And I really just realized that life is short and can be short. We never know when our last day is, and we need to embrace that. A lot of us, we take time for granted, and we say, oh, one day I'll get there, or when I'm retired, or when I have this, or when I have that. And we don't know when that's going to be. And I always try to, since that trip, every time I am living my life or wanting to do something or to travel somewhere new, I'm like, I want to live life. Like if I were to die tomorrow, I wouldn't have any regrets. I would be like, yes, I did everything that I wanted to do, or I did everything to the best of my ability that I could have done to enjoy my life while also working hard. So I think that's
a great answer. Thank you. I appreciate that. Now, I know in like Europe especially, they don't work near as hard as they do here. And we have a tendency to work our butts off and work our lives away. But what is the difference between that and here and that there?
So I would say in Europe, they do have a little bit more relaxed of a schedule, but they very much value free time. And like Sundays are very important to them. Like when they're off of work, they're off of work. It's not expected for you to continue working or to stay late, or their typical work week is 35 hours a week. So yeah, it's a lot different. And they typically get paid 5 to 6 weeks paid, 4 to 6 weeks paid vacation, depending on what country you're in, mandatory. Like you have to take the vacation. When you think about companies over there, like they are forcing their workers to do that because they, one, value it, and the people take their vacation over there, where unlike in America, we like don't for some reason. Like people are proud that they don't take their vacation, and I'm like, what are we? And over there, they know how important mental health is, and they know how important it is to have that free time and to know like when you're working. Like we don't work to live, we live to, or we shouldn't live to work, we should work to live. And that is what they truly live by. And I don't think any America will ever be like Europe or anything like that, but I do think there's a couple of things we could take from their book of just making sure we're taking our time off and taking care of ourselves.
Free healthcare and
they have free healthcare, they're taken care of. And a lot of times, when they are getting those benefits, like even after, because a lot of people want to go straight to taxes, and we're not going to make this political or whatever, but like even after the amount of taxes that cover all of that is taken away, they still have a decent livable wage. They don't work off of tips over there. So because everybody's getting paid a living wage, so because they're required to pay them a living wage, so they don't have the tip wage that we have here. So it's a slower pace of life over there. And honestly, I think it's really great for everybody to see, especially from a first world perspective, right? I think a lot of times people go to like third world countries, I don't want to call them developing countries, right? And they see that, and then they come back and they're like, they think one way. And I think it's great to experience, but I think going to another first world country and seeing, wow, like they have their stuff together. They're not like in poverty. Like they're living their life and living it a slightly different way. But I think we can always all learn from one another.
Yeah. Well, all right. So why is it that you think, or why are, how do I phrase this? So I want your thoughts on why people can't learn from other people and their mistakes and their lessons that they have learned. Why is that so hard for people to actually grasp and put into practice in their own life?
That's a great question. Honestly, I think what it comes from is perspective is reality for people. So, and perception is reality. So, I actually have an analogy for this, because I describe it as like we're all born into a box, and that box is filled with everything that our parents, our surrounding society, so wherever we are raised, the cultural norms, etc., is all put into this box, right? For 18 years, we're in this box, and sometimes longer, until somebody comes along and kind of opens it up and says, you don't have to, like, these are just like kind of the core basics, but there's more out there. So I think what happens is that people go based off of their own experiences, which is all we really can do, right? And then when we're trying to learn from somebody else's experience, it's really hard to do that when we don't have it firsthand. And that's actually why I try to encourage as many people as possible to travel. And my whole goal is to inspire people to travel, is because I can tell you all day long what it's like. I can tell you and try and share videos with you, but until you go there and experience it and feel it and talk to people and have that experience yourself, you're not gonna know. And I think it only takes one trip. Like it only takes one trip to see. So I think it's just a matter of people being a little bit more open-minded too, to like it kind of comes down to empathy a little bit, because I know which is some people's strong suits and some people are developing, and I think it's a skill that we as adults, need to develop earlier on. But being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes, to be able to say, how would I feel if that happened? And not just be like, this is how it's happening to me and this is how I feel, but no, like how, and doing that with every situation that we run into.
Yeah, that's great advice. So I like that, because you can look how you'd feel in somebody else's shoes, as the saying goes. I like that. I find that be very valuable. Thank you, Lucy. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have now I think we can get down to the traveling, and
Okay.
I'm just curious, what is your kind of traveling?
That is also a great question. So my type of travel is backpacker style. So I have a backpack that I wear. It's a 50-liter Kelty backpack. And I stay in hostels. I stay as affordable as possible because I do not really care where I sleep, in the sense like I want to spend my money on food and experiences and seeing how it's like in the local places that I'm going to. So I really try to, I'll go and see the Paris and Romes of the world and such. And there's obviously value in those places, but I love getting the local experience of a country, making sure that if I am going to Paris, that I'm also going to somewhere else in France. Like I went to like a few different places in France to make sure that I'm getting the true culture of a place. It's just like when people come to Florida and they go to Miami and they think Miami is Florida. And I'm like, that is not.
I'm going to Miami.
And Miami is not the representation of Florida in any way. Like there's actually a lot of nature in Florida. Or they think Orlando's Florida. So it's just a matter of perspective. And I think that's important for other people to see too. So that's how I like to travel, is on a budget with my backpack.
And how exactly did you figure that out? I mean, that's not common knowledge. People don't just be like, "Hey, I'm gonna go here and backpack around Europe."
Yeah,
They don't do that.
I actually did a lot of research on it when I was looking at the most affordable ways to be able to travel, because I didn't have a lot of money. I didn't grow up with money. Some people, I guess, have thought that I did because they see how much I travel and they think I'm rich by some means. I'm not. I needed to, because I didn't grow up with a lot of money. I needed to find, and because I had that little bit of money, I needed to figure out how to stretch it as far as I could. So I was looking up how to travel on a budget, and then I saw like backpacking, and then I was like, okay, like what? And then I found hostels and public transportation, which I had never, because I'm from a small town in Florida, and in America in general, we use cars. So I had to learn about public transportation, and that's also a really affordable means of traveling. So I just did a lot of research, and then it was trial and error, going to the places and kind of winging it when you're there to figure it out, because you can't find all the resources always online. You can learn a lot, but you kind of have to be willing to take it when you learn along the way.
I like that too. Sometimes you have to learn by doing.
Yeah.
That's a very big thing that I think a lot of people are lacking. I mean, they don't start something because they don't know how, but if they start, they will figure it out.
Yes, I just have had this conversation multiple times this week. Wow. And this week is only 2 days in. Where, people say all the time, like tell me, they're like, oh, well, you're a business owner and you're really good at business. I was like, but when I started my business, I did not know how to start nobody knows how to start a business until you start it. And then you do a little bit of research and you learn along the way. Or there's so many things in life that's applicable to.
Yeah. So we have Ben Bruce in the comments here, and I'm going to get to a few questions that they have, because I don't want to take up all the time asking the things I'm curious about. So he is asking, how often do you travel? How are you able to manage your travel budget? Can you share some great experiences you've gathered during the course of your travel, and what can you tell somebody who has the intention of traveling around the world?
Those are great questions. All right, I'll take one at a time.
All right, you want me to leave it up there? I'll leave it up there so you can read them.
Yeah, you can leave it up there, and I can see it on the side too. So, one, I travel. I typically travel once a month almost. Like it kind of narrows down to that. There's some months where I don't travel, but I'm gone for a lot the next month. Last year, actually, I traveled 115 days out of 365 days. So
Wow.
yeah, and I've been tracking that for the past couple of years. So the year before that, it was 20 days more than the year before that. And yeah, I'm always shocked myself. I'm like going back, it doesn't feel like that much. And then I'm like, oh, it is. So
That is great.
that's how much I traveled last year. This year, I actually have a goal of traveling an accumulated amount of hopefully 6 months out of the year. We'll see. I'm not a huge fan of hot, so I try to escape Florida as much as I can. And I've built my businesses to be remote so that I'm able to work remotely. And I am almost always working when I'm traveling. So that's something I'm really passionate about. How I'm able to manage my travel budget is, again, I am always looking for the cheapest way to get things done. So when I am going and doing my flights, like a lot of times I actually don't pay for my flights because I maximize my credit card points and I'm getting my flights for free. So that is something that a skill I have learned over the years that has been incredibly valuable to me and is kind of like travel hacking a little bit. So that's one way. And I also, if I am looking at flights, I know how to find cheaper flights. So there's some different tricks you can use with Google Flights and some of the other tools out there. And then I always stay at hostels, which are super cheap. I've stayed at hostels for as low as $8 a night. Wow. In certain countries. And when I say $8 a night, I'm not in the middle of a broom closet somewhere. Like it's not Harry Potter style. It is actually an incredibly beautiful areas. And essentially when you're in a hostel, you are renting a bed and you're not renting an entire room. And they do have private rooms that cost a little bit more if that's what you're looking for. Sometimes those private rooms are $50 to $70 a night, which is still more affordable than a hotel, but they have a really great common spaces. And at the end of the day, I'm not spending time at the hostel a lot of the times, unless I'm like working out in the common area. I'm not in my bed. So why do I need to spend hundreds of dollars on a room that I'm not even going to spend time in when I'm out exploring the area, working at a cafe or whatever it might be? So that's a big way I save money. And then I always take public transportation whenever I'm traveling, because sometimes you could take a train in other countries for $2, $3 for a ride. It's insanely affordable.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So and then the next one, what can you share with us some great experiences? Yeah. So, that is so hard to nail down just one. But I would say, so if I was what I would say is the most impactful experience, and was a great experience, but actually very sombering as well. And something I've found myself even more interested in as time has gone on is actually Germany is one of my favorite countries. And I've actually been to Germany like 7 or 8 different times. Wow. I just hosted a group trip to Germany for the Christmas markets over the holiday season. And it was incredible. But Germany is, I feel like, one of the more underrated countries. It's not like the Paris or, Rome, etc., or Switzerland, but it's such an impactful country to go to because I have found and learned a lot about the Holocaust there. And so I have been to, I think it's over 10 or 12 German cities now, different German cities across the country. It's very different in the south of Germany to the north of Germany to the east versus the west. And it's a large country. But one of the most impactful experiences of going to Berlin and going to the Holocaust, the memorial for the murdered Jews in the middle of the city, and just learning more about Hitler and that whole entire area of time. People there are, I would say They even feel some slight guilt still to this day, but they discuss it. They have open conversations about it. And I think that that's something that we don't really do in the United States, unfortunately. And I really appreciate that. And I just recently, this past year, also went to Poland, where Auschwitz is. And I got to experience Auschwitz, which is the largest concentration camp that existed. Yeah. And for those who don't know, and that was an incredible experience to see. And that's, talk about something that you have to experience. You can't, I could have tried to describe it, but it was, I think everybody should go there and visit it, and talk about making every second count. Like, those people did not know what was fully going on. And even when they did, they didn't know when their seconds were going to end. And it was incredibly impactful. So I've loved learning about that, because I feel like it teaches us more about how to be more human and understanding and forgiving and aware of how other people are living, and the history and how important it is. I didn't care about history until I started traveling. So
that's really cool. And then what can you tell somebody that's interested in traveling around the world? What would be like your top 3 tips?
Top 3 tips. Make sure that you go somewhere more than just the big city, right? So like I kind of already mentioned before, like, don't just go to the Paris or Amsterdam or Rome or whatever it might be, the biggest capital, right? You can go there, but make sure that you go beyond those areas, because a lot of times those areas end up being really touristy, and it's great to go and experience that, but you won't really feel the culture of these places and the history of these places if that's all you experience. So I would highly recommend doing that. Free walking tours are available in almost every major city and even smaller cities sometimes. So if you're going to go to a place, take a free walking tour. The free walking tours are incredible because you actually get to choose how much you want to pay. This is another tip actually with traveling on a budget. If you want to learn about the history of a place rather than going and paying for a tour or whatever it is, if you take a free walking tour, you get to choose how much you want to tip at the end. So that could be €5, that could be, $10, $20, however much you want to tip, based off of your budget. And they are super passionate about teaching, and because they're working off the tips, like they really give you a great story. And so that is a great tip, and you'll learn a lot about the local area and the history and the culture. And they can give you great tips on local restaurants because they live there, right? They can give you tips on the restaurants to go to, the places to see. So I've found some incredible places just asking the tour guide where I should go next. And I'm like, where should I really go? And then they tell me.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah. And I feel like that kind of is 3 tips and 2 tips, but
all right, that's okay.
Being open-minded, I would say, is the 3rd one. Just understand that, have an open heart and an open mind, and be willing to have conversations with people you don't know, because I'm telling you, the world out there is not as dangerous as it seems. A lot of people are super kind if you just speak with them and are open to it.
Yeah. And then he is also asking any challenges while traveling.
Oh yeah. I always tell people you can't expect everything to go perfectly. And if it does, great, but don't expect it to, especially if you're going to be on a budget. I have had some really, really interesting public transport stories, especially like in Chile and Colombia, in like some of those countries, even in Europe. I've had them when traveling to Germany. I would say, so if I were to say one, okay, so here, I'll say one from Europe, actually, since we've been talking about Europe. So one time, my best friend lives in Denmark. So she moved there about 9 years ago, and she's from Florida and everything, but her heart was in Denmark. So she moved there.
Wow.
Yeah. And her family, she has family from there and everything. So she moved there, lives her life over there now, and has her Danish citizenship. And I was visiting her, and I was actually on my way to Germany to meet up with some people that I met on a hike in Ireland. and they invited me to their like family home in Germany like a couple months later because I was in Europe for that 4 months. And this has
Yeah.
happened to me multiple times, but I love telling that story because again, it's like kindness of people like just inviting you into your home. And they were super kind and picked me up from the train station. On my way to the train, like on my way to Germany, I had 3 train connections. And one of them was in the middle of like this small town I believe it was in Germany, not in Denmark, because Denmark and Germany border each other. And I thought like it was an overnight layover of like 6-7 hours. Well, I thought the train station would be open, but it wasn't.
What?
So I arrived and I had 6 to 7 hours to wait. And it was cold. It was like 40 degrees outside or something.
Wow.
And there was nowhere to really be. And I wasn't anticipating being outside for 6 hours. So I actually ended up going into like the warmest solution I could come up with was going into the elevator and like staying in the elevator for that hours and like taking a nap. And I remember taking like that's when I was on Snapchat. I'm not on Snapchat anymore. But I like remember like snapping my friends being like, so I'm in the middle of Germany somewhere at a train station. And there was nobody around. There was a couple of people who had also, I guess, done the same thing or whatever, and were just hanging out. Maybe they understood what they were signing up for, but yeah, like I pushed through that, took a nap in the elevator, and
now I'm curious. Like, I know there are things like Google Translate, and I'm sure Apple has the same kind of thing. I don't know. I'm not an Apple person, but how is it with the language barrier?
that's a great question. I'm so glad you asked because people ask me that all the time and they think there's going to be this huge language barrier. I would say in most first world countries that you're going to, anywhere in Europe, most of them speak English, especially if they're younger. If they are under 40 years old, they typically speak very good English. If you actually think about it, when a lot of these people in these countries travel to nearby countries. And so like if Spain speaks Spanish and Germany speaks German and in Denmark they speak Danish, right? The common language that they're actually using when they're in other countries is typically English.
Yeah.
So the rest of the world really learns English. And even when you go to some of the other countries like in South and Central America, again, the younger populations know English. Even the older populations do too, but they learned it a little bit later on in their life. So it's a little bit different for them. And sometimes a lot of times people are actually a little bit shy with their English. So, they feel like their English is really bad, but usually it's actually pretty decent. So
awesome.
Yeah, everybody speaks I don't want to say everybody, a lot of people do.
That is so cool. Now, thank you so much for answering that question. I appreciate it. But we have actually gone like 10 minutes over time, but that's all right because it is my show after all. But I need to go ahead and cut it off here, but I want to say thank you again for taking the time out of your busy evening, Lucie. I will be reaching out here shortly because I have a few other things I would like to ask you. And I also want everybody out there, including you, Lucie, to do me a favor.
Okay.
I need you to make every second count. Why, you might ask? Because you never know when those seconds will run out on your one life. Hey, I'll see you guys back here next Tuesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. But until then, have a fantastic week. Thanks again, Lucie.
Thank
Have a
you,
great
Jeff.
night.
You too. Bye.
Sorry.